I live in South Georgia, and as most everyone knows, recently we had a pretty big hurricane blow through. I spent the day before making my usual storm preparations, which of course consisted of buying all the water I could find and other, more spirited drinks if you catch my drift. This was accompanied by enough bread and condiments to live off peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for a month. I rode the storm out like I had done every other time, but this one was different. Being from the South, you hear all sorts of folktales and rumors that probably get passed around so much it's a different story by the time it gets from one side of town to the next. In all my years, I've never heard of anything like this though. Last night, I swear the storm was, well, for lack of a better term, crying. Initially, I thought it was just the wind finding its way through the cracks in my home. I was sitting in my recliner watching the news and waiting for the inevitable power outage that always occurred. The acres upon acres of pine trees surrounding my cabin made it pretty easy. When I first heard it, I was minding my own business watching the local station with a drink in my hand. It was quiet and almost unnoticeable. You know the sound when the wind hits just the right spot and makes that low drawn-out whoosh that reverberates through the air for a bit. Well, I thought that's what I was hearing at first until the TV quieted down for a moment as it skipped to a commercial, and in those few seconds I heard it plain as day. It sounded just like someone was crying off in the distance. I didn't pay it any mind though, because you can place all kinds of sounds wrong, especially out here. The forest has no shortage of instruments after all. It wasn't long after that I finally ended up losing my lights, and Jonas, our weatherman, lost a viewer. I decided at that point to go sit out on my small screen and porch for a little bit while I downed a couple more drinks. It's nothing special, but it was screened in to halt the army of insects, and was sturdy enough, at least so far, that it never really got very damaged during big storms. Storms have this chaotic beauty to them. Sure, sometimes they can cause a lot of damage, but I don't know. To me, I've grown fond of them over the years. It was mostly in part thanks to my wife, who would always make me sit out here and watch them with her. Even though she's not around, it still feels like the right thing to do. So there I was sitting on my porch as the last light of day was swallowed up by thunder clouds. I had just finished my drink and was just watching the trees do their dance in the wind. That same sound I heard earlier started up again, that low whoosh that slowly melted away to the sounds of crying. This time though, I couldn't shake it off. I knew what I was hearing. I stood up and looked through the rain as best I could with the little daylight that was left, and thought for a moment I saw something, but just as I tried to focus in on it, whatever it was ducked out of view behind some shrubs. The sound continued for a while, but as it got dark and the wind began to pick up even more, I decided to head in for the night. That sound was definitely not going to make sleep easy. I kept telling myself it was just some wind passing through the trees at just the right angle, but it just sounded too real to me, too alive for it to be just the wind. I did eventually drift off to sleep after about an hour of tossing and turning because the crying never stopped. It picked up and died off at times, but it was always there. That's when I made my first mistake. I remembered a pair of earplugs I had left over from a day at the range that was tucked away in my nightstand, so I popped them right in, and off to dreamland I went. I was jostled awake by a thumping noise that I felt more than heard because of the earplugs. Just as I turned in my bed, a flash of lightning outside my window painted a silhouette behind the window curtain. I raced off my bed to the other side of the room as a scream hitched in the back of my throat. I ripped the earplugs out, and that's when I heard more clearly what woke me up. Sobbing came from everywhere I listened, along with sporadic banging on all sides of my house. Lightning flashed again, but this time the shape was gone. I reached into the closet that I was pressed against and grabbed the .308 I kept tucked in the corner. I sat there with my rifle trained on the window for God knows how long as the cacophony of wails intermingled with the heavy rain outside. I grabbed my phone, but when I pressed the home button, nothing happened. It was dead. I cursed myself, and as I set the phone back down, I heard the front door bang, bang, bang. I could hear the hinges buckle and rattle as they held on for dear life. I said a prayer that they would hold out. That dream lasted for a whole 2 seconds before I heard another set of bangs, followed by the door crashing down somewhere inside the house. I ran over and pressed all my weight on my bedroom door, hoping whoever was in there would find what they wanted and leave. I heard what sounded like more than one set of footsteps on the boards, but what frightened me the most was hearing them sob as they walked around my house. It sounded horrible, like the crying you would only experience after hearing your father passed, or a child's life being snuffed out early, or your wife just one day gone. I heard the doorknob twist, which was followed up by banging. I begged and pleaded for them to leave, but I never heard any type of response. They just kept wailing, and I got to the point where I couldn't take it. I raised my rifle and pointed it over my shoulder where I felt the banging, and squeezed. The crack of the rifle was deafening, and for a moment the entire world fell silent. I sat there for a moment, realizing I could no longer hear the knocks or wailing of my assailants. With my back still pressed against the door, I focused all my energy into listening for the smallest sound of movement through the rain. The wind was absolutely whipping the rain as I heard it patter the side of my house, but hard as I tried, I couldn't hear a sound. Then a flash of lightning lit up the house, and once again I saw a figure at my window, a white glossy eye peering through the crack where the curtains met, right at me. I screamed as my heart rammed inside me. Then another flash lit up the room, and this time it had a hand placed on the glass. I raised my rifle, pulled the bolt back, and rechambered a round. "I'll shoot. Please, just leave me alone." Darkness engulfed the room again, and I was left there, rifle shaking in my hands. I felt like I was digging a hole in my shoulder with the stock, trying to steady myself to regain some sense of composure. 3 slow taps on the window. It began sliding open. "Don't come in here." The room flashed, and I saw 2 black, pale hands grasping the bottom of the window, hoisting it open. That was all I could take. I fired again. I could feel the rain blow in from my now shattered window. Tears were making their way down my face at this point, but still, I kept my rifle pointed. I don't know how long I stayed like that until another flash lit up my surroundings, and my blood froze. The figure was standing right in front of me now. I pulled the trigger again. Click. I had forgotten to chamber another round. I pulled so hard I thought I would pull the bolt clean out of the rifle, and as I heard another round click into place, another flash, I dropped my weapon and heard it rattle the floorboards, but I couldn't fire again, especially not at her. "Laura," I quietly chirped out, the name feeling foreign because I hadn't spoken it in so long. My wife was looking dead at me through the flash of light. Her milky eyes ripped through me, past my flesh, and into my very being, my soul. I couldn't move. I no longer paid any mind to what was going on around me. I wanted to rush into her and wrap her in my arms, but I couldn't get myself to move. Some part of me was keeping me planted. That animal, primal section of my mind screamed to run. "Why didn't you look for me?" I heard her say, but her voice sounded garbled, like she had water in her throat. "I did, baby. I looked so hard for you." "No, you left me there. I wanted you to find me, but you never came." Another flash. It wasn't just Laura in the room. A mass of bodies behind her, like a tidal wave of sorrow and hatred waiting for the right moment to boil over and swallow me up. Maybe I did deserve this. I felt hands wrap around my throat. Too many to count began swarming me. "I'm sorry, baby. I love you," was the last thing I managed to croak out through the hands crushing my windpipe and fingers reaching into my mouth, into my throat. A violent crack sounded outside, followed by my retinas burning due to the flash. I heard screeching and yelling before another few pops, and a loud crash. Rain pattered my face, and something else. I felt a hand caress my cheek, and a warm sensation flooded my body. Then I blacked out. I came to in the hospital the next day. A nurse told me someone had called 911 for me, and I asked if I could meet them, but they never received a name. They let me go home that afternoon, and I got to see my house, or what remained of it, for the first time. A large pine that was next to my house had snapped basically at the base and fell directly into my home. And when I say it wrecked my house, it had basically split my bedroom down the middle, and the kitchen was gone. I spent the afternoon collecting what little I could still salvage from it and threw it into the back of my truck. There was no way I was spending another night there. I took one last look at the tree before I left for a friend's house. Right at the base was a crudely etched heart with 2 initials, L+E.